I don't think anybody's gonna come. Do you want me to just, are we go, you call the meeting, who calls the meeting, what time?
I guess I can go and do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we must be ready, no chairs over there.
Yeah. We can go ahead and get started. You got the recorder or whatever?
Mm-hmm. It's on.
My name's Scott Simpson. I'm the city attorney, and you all have all been appointed to serve on the city's charter review committee. And our charter says that we need to have a charter review committee convened 16 months before so you got plenty of time to do what you're going to do. A lot of times when I sit with cities doing charter reviews, it's sitting like in January, February, and we have the election and the upcoming fall. And there's a period of time that the city council has to do things, so it doesn't leave a lot of time for a charter review. In your situation, you got plenty of time to review this. What y'all need to do is initially, you need to select probably a chairman and a vice chairman. And that person's not getting paid any more than y'all. Or everybody getting the same thing. It's just someone to kind of keep the meeting organized, call the meeting together, keep the meeting going forward, and kind of try to organize, keep the meeting going forward and organized. No more authority, no greater voting power. It's just someone to try to keep us all moving in the right direction. It's the best way I can say it. So I don't know if somebody wants to serve. Y'all, anybody have any wants to serve? Don't look at me. Don't look at me. So,
We need a chairman and a vice chairman.
I nominate Rick and Paul.
Rick and Paul.
So you lost my business, buddy.
just out of curiosity, which one's chairman, which one's vice chairman?
Paul. Who's chairman? No. If it's gonna work this fast, the railroad's coming, buddy. And I second that.
All right. So, y'all accept?
I'll accept.
Chairman, vice chairman? Okay. We have a motion and a second. What I'm saying right now is what you're going to be saying from this point forward. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have a chairman and a vice chairman. As I said, you're going to be reviewing the charter and making recommendations to the commission. I think it's important, what I like to do when I meet with charter reviews is help explain to you what is a charter, what's the purpose of the charter. If you're going to review and make recommendations on it, you really need to know what does it function, why do we have it. So,
How often do we review the charter?
10 years. That's not by law, that's just, I think, in your charter. But that seems to be kind of the trend, even if it's not in the charter, about every 10 years. Quick thing. One, you're now an appointed government body board. That means you are subject to the Sunshine Law. What the Sunshine Law means, you may have heard that, is you can't talk to each other outside of a called meeting about something that could come before you for action. And since what you're looking at is to make recommendations to the charter about potentially anything related to the city, my advice to you is for the next 16 months, don't talk to each other about anything related to the city. Stay well within the compliance. The other thing, you probably won't become an issue, but there's some public records law. If you receive anything, if somebody sends you a letter about you need to change the charter to do this, make sure you bring it into city staff so it's a public record. Any document you get related to the charter review committee and what it's doing, we just need to get that to city staff so they can keep it in public record. By law, we have to do those things. Odds are you probably don't know that's not going to happen, but I just want to make you aware of that. The big one is the Sunshine Law. So, now, what is a charter? Have you all ever heard the phrase home rule power, municipal home rule power? Anybody ever heard that phrase before? Well, it's an important phrase in relation to cities' authority. And because home rule power was a constitutional amendment in 1968, and then it was legislatively adopted or further implemented in 1960, an act of the legislature that creates a city. And so the charter was the bill that was adopted to create the city. And all the authorities that the city had to have, anything the city wanted to do, had to be delegated by the state in that bill, or the amendments to that bill. So obviously the charter used to be very big. Because everything that we could do as a city had to be delegated to the city in the charter. And then home rule power came in '68. And I'll read to you what the Constitution says. Municipalities shall have governmental, corporate, proprietary powers to enable them to conduct municipal government, perform municipal functions, and render municipal services, and may exercise any power for municipal purposes except as otherwise provided by law. Each municipal legislative body shall be elected. So what that did was to say, by state constitution, we now have this authority. We don't need the delegation anymore. So the charter used to be a granting document. I always said it was a granting new power. When home rule came into place, we don't need the charter anymore for authority. State constitution gives us that authority. So the question was, what do you do with these charters? You have all these charters, all these things, because really what happens is when the state said, we grant you the authority to have a law enforcement department, and then this is how you will establish that law enforcement department, that was a grant of authority. You don't need that today. But if you still have that charter provision, that became a limitation. Because now it tells you how you have to do it. So what did the legislature do in 1972 or 3? I'll just read you some of the state law. As provided in that constitutional provision I just read to you, municipalities shall have the governmental, corporate, proprietary power to enable them to conduct municipal government, perform municipal functions, and render municipal service, and may exercise any power for municipal purposes except expressly prohibited by law. Municipal purpose, any activity or power which may be exercised by the state or its plural subdivision. So unless there's a law that says otherwise, we can do whatever the state does. How you interpret it. The legislature recognizes that pursuant to the grant of power set forth in the Charter and the Constitution, the legislative body of each city has the power to enact legislation concerning any subject matter upon which the state legislature may act, except one, annexation, merger. Annexation is how we bring land into a city. That's governed by state law. Merger, how we would merge with another jurisdiction or merge powers, that's addressed by the state constitution and state law. Exercise of extraterritorial powers, which means our authority to go outside the jurisdictional limits of the city to do something in the unincorporated area. So we don't have the authority to address those issues. We cannot adopt a law or an ordinance that says, this is how we're going to annex. The state has addressed that. Any subject expressly prohibited by the Constitution. Any subject expressly preempted to state or county government by the Constitution or by general law. And any subject preempted to a county pursuant to county charter. We're in Volusia County. Volusia County is a charter county, actually the first one. So the county has the ability, by charter, to supersede our authority. So basically, we have the ability to do anything, with the way I look at it, except we can't violate federal law, federal constitution, state law, state constitution. We can't violate county charter. So if unless it's one of those things, we can pretty much have the authority to address those issues. And so this is what the legislature said, and this is kind of important because they said they identify certain areas, what I'm going to call the core areas of the charter, which were not repealed by home rule. Because now that home rule came into effect, it granted all this authority, so we don't need all these provisions in our charter anymore. So the provisions of this section shall be so construed as to secure for municipalities a broad exercise of home rule powers granted by the Constitution. Further, the intent of the legislature that to the extent municipalities exercise the powers for municipal government, everything, not expressly prohibited by the Constitution, general, special law, or county charter, and to remove any limitation, judicially imposed or otherwise, on the exercise of home rule powers other than those so expressly prohibited. However, nothing in this act the act being the Home Rule Power Act, shall be construed to permit any changes in a special law or municipal charter which affects the exercise of extraterritorial power, which affects an area which includes lands within or without municipality, or any change in special law or municipal charter which affects the creation and existence of a municipality, the terms of the elected officers, and the manner of their election. So the terms, is it 2 years or is it 4 years? The manner of their election, is it primary generals, is it general, those type of changes could require changes. Are still intact. Except that you can change election dates and qualifying periods, and you can change terms to coincide with those changes of election. So if you decide to go from 2 years to 4 years, or you want to move, in Volusia County, there used to be elections all throughout the year. There would be sometimes elections in February for a city. And everybody kind of moved, they said, well, we want to move now to a unified election date. There's a law passed up in Volusia County years ago. And so you had to extend the terms of people to get to that next election. So you can do that, that's allowed to be done. Let's see. Distribution of powers among elected officers, matters prescribed by charter relating to appointed boards, any change in the form of government, and any rights of municipal employees without a referendum of the voters. So those things I just listed. So the municipal home rule basically preempted everything except those things I just read to you, and those things could not be changed unless the voters approved it. And then it says, any other limitation of power upon a municipality contained in a municipal charter enacted or adopted prior to July 1st, 1973 is hereby nullified and repealed. So if there is any limitation of power in a charter other than those identified areas, what I'm going to say are the core things the charter needs to address, they became a nullity in 73. Now, one of the problems a lot of cities had is, I think what everybody should have done is just rewrote their charters, take all that stuff out, and just address those core functions. But some cities didn't do that. They left their charters intact. And over the years, those provisions that were once a grant of authority, because it was before home rule power, now have stayed in the charter. They were nullified, but no one took them out. And over the years, people just assume they're still there, still authorized. They become a limitation. And so that's some of the issues that you end up dealing with charters when you rewrite it. Like your charter has some provisions in there that you wouldn't see in a normal charter. If you were to do a new kind, if you were to look at, we would say, a model charter, depending on what type of form of government you chose, you wouldn't see what you currently have as a charter. Because home rule grants a lot of authority, and the charter today, whatever we put in the charter is a limitation on that authority. The most important thing I want you to realize is we don't have to address every issue in the charter. You know, I don't want you to think, well, if the charter doesn't address it, the city can't do it. No, that's not true. Home rule gives the city the authority to do it. If it's not in the charter, it's decided by the commission, the council. We'll decide how to do it. You only put things in the charter where you really want to take that discretion away from the council. And you want to say, no, this is how we want this to be done, and only this way. An example, I had represented South Daytona for numerous years, and we had an FPL franchise, for electric franchise. And we were going through a renewal of our electric franchise, and our old franchise had the right to buy the old distribution system. And FPL said, we're not giving you another right to buy. And it turned us into going into exercising that option to buy, litigation over that. But one of the things FPL did is they said, they got a political action committee together and proposed a charter amendment to the city's charter that said before they could ever purchase an get in the electric distribution business, they had to be approved by a referendum vote of the voters. Now, that wasn't in the charter before, so the council can make that decision. Once that was put into the charter, now the council doesn't have the authority to get in the electric business. The voters have to approve that. That's an example. So as we go through, when you go through and you want to, don't think we have to put things in the charter. The question is this something that can only be done a certain way? Or do we allow the council the discretion to make that decision? Because home rule gives the city an awful lot of authority today to do things. Now, how does the charter get amended? There's two ways. One, the council, the city, can propose amendments to the voters. And these are amendments that the council believes are in the best interest of the city. They propose amendments, these proposed changes to the charter. That's what this process we're in right now. You are an advisory board to the commission, council, which means this is part of the council's determination to submit proposed amendments to the voters. Now, you're an advisory board. It goes to the council. The council could accept everything you recommend. The council could reject everything you recommend. They could accept some, reject some, and the council could come up with their own proposed amendments as well. So, just going into this, I've had charter review say, like, we can spend all this time and make this recommendation, and the council, the governing body can say no. It's what it is. Just I know that going in.
Well, it's kind of ironic because you're saying what we would put in the charter would limit the authority of the council in some areas. But they could just say, we don't want that limit, so we're not going for it, right? They would.
In terms of what they submit to the voters. Now, the other option is the citizens can always propose an amendment. Now, there's a process to go through that. So
that's the other way.
That's the other way. So, say hypothetically, you all believe very strongly about a particular amendment, the council says no. Y'all can say, well, you know what, we're going to get a citizens initiative together and get enough signatures and put that on there anyway. That's an option. So, I'll give you another example. In Holly Hill right now, we're doing a charter review in Holly Hill. I represent Holly Hill. In Holly Hill's charter, there is a requirement that we put fluoride in the water, in the charter. So, as you may have heard, fluoride's kind of a, hot topic button for some people right now. But because it's in the charter, we have no discretion. Can't decide otherwise. Now, the federal government could say no fluoride in the water. State government could say no fluoride in the water. They could preempt us. Yes.
They're looking at that now.
Yeah. And so, but until that happens, either we have to amend our charter, take it out, or we have to wait till the state or federal government supersedes our authority and says no fluoride. Now, that's probably going to be discussed in Holly Hill's charter review, but they really have two choices. They got three choices. One is keep it in, so the council has no discretion to not provide fluoride. They could just strike the whole provision, in which case it's up to the council, commission, decide we're going to have fluoride, or they switch it and say we're going to change and say there will not be fluoride in the water, and then once again, you're taking away the commission's discretion to make that decision. You're saying, no, absolutely, there will not be fluoride in the water. So the only way we get fluoride in the water is if the federal or state government mandates it. So that's kind of how that charter provision works. So, any questions?
No, I just, when we got this, it was a shock because we were on the charter review committee back when we first moved out here.
Mm-hmm.
Charter was this thick.
Yeah.
We spent weeks weeding through.
What year was that?
16?
It's because they finally took out everything and
We took
codified it into the
Yeah.
code of ordinances.
Because
So
it was so bulky that, they were talking
So it's
about
probably-
gray wagons and.
Yeah.
and
That is
constables
probably the
and-
pre-home rule power charter.
it
Yeah.
was.
It never got.
It had never been amended
Never
from the
been
20s,
amended
28 or
when we
whatever. Yeah.
Horrible process.
I looked at the 2016 amendments, and there were some changes that were done, and the basis of that change that were done were not submitted to the voters because of that language I read to you, where it says any limitation on power that existed before 1973 was a nullity, there was some regulations adopted saying these things are nullities pursuant to that statute. And
It's a
so-
big help. I mean, this is much more cut and dry and
It is.
functional.
It is, yeah, it definitely is, and I always say, look, a small charter, don't say, oh, a small charter is a bad thing.
Mm.
You don't want a big charter, you want to, it's hard to predict the future on what you want or don't, what's gonna happen, and so it's good to leave some discretion into your elected officials to make decisions as they go along. Like I said, the only thing you want to put in the charter is something there's absolutely, this is the way it's gonna be done. Regardless of who's sitting in that, any elected official seat, these are certain things that have to be done a certain way. The form of government may be something that we discuss quite a bit. I'll be honest with you, Pierson is not a form of government that I recognize. Let's be honest, it's flat out honest. It's not one, there's certain types of government that you see. Pierson ain't one of those
No.
types. It's kind of its own thing, which is not a bad thing, but they create some questions sometimes about who has the authority to do what and things like that. But is there any other questions about generally the home rule and what a charter does? Because once we go past charters, and you're not going to get into this, the charter's sort of like our Constitution. Then we have ordinances that are our laws that kind of, I'm going to say they're going to implement this Constitution, but that's where a lot of the regulations that the city has come into place through ordinances. So that's not what we're talking about here today. Today we're talking about the city's Constitution, which is our charter. Any questions?
I think our last thing that was brought before the voters, I believe, was the changing so the mayor has a vote on the council. Because remember, the mayor just was a figurehead and never voted.
He's a
So
baby
Right.
kisser.
that aligned us more with other cities and the way they functioned. And
There's basically three types of government out there. Probably the most popular one is what is referred to as the city manager form of government. And staff and I can get you copies of other jurisdictions' charters. You can also go, there's a website, it's called Municipal Code Corporation, or Municode. And that thing will pull up the regulations of all the cities in the whole country. And they'll give you all of them in Florida, and you can look at other jurisdictions' charters and see if you want to see how they are. But there's basically three types. Probably the most prevalent one right now in the country is the city manager form of government. And I kind of compare it to a publicly traded company. The electorate of a city is like shareholders. Shareholders vote in a board of directors. Electorate vote in elected officials. Board of directors hire a CEO to run the day-to-day affairs. The commission hires city manager to run the day-to-day affairs. The city commission sets policy, board of directors set policy. And then the CEO manager carries out those, is responsible for carrying out those policies. Part of the reason is you see this form of government is because running a city has gotten far more complex with all the laws and regulations that have to be in place. What cities had to do in the 50s and what they had to do today is just not different. It's just, there are no small town rules. There are no Mayberry rules out there. We all have to comply with the same state and federal laws regardless of the size of the community. And that makes it tough, for small jurisdictions for sure. So with a city manager form of government, your commission, they meet far more frequently than a board of directors. It meets like annually. The commission meets at least typically once to twice a month. And they generally set the policies. They adopt the budget, they set the millage, through the budget adoption, they say, okay, in each one of these categories, this is how much money we're allowing to be spent. We'll adopt ordinances, which include purchasing ordinances, say we've set aside X number of dollars to be spent, but you follow the purchasing ordinance that tells you how you're going to spend that money. And different, depending on how much money it costs, we're either going to get 3 verbal quotes, 3 written quotes, or we're going to go out for formal RFPs or sealed bids. They adopt zoning regulations. They adopt comprehensive plans. They adopt everything, land development code, which deals with what your setback, how tall things can be, what use can go in certain areas. You know, commission really does have a lot of authority, but once they adopt all those policies, it's the city manager's job to run the day-to-day affairs of the city. And the commission is typically prohibited from giving any direction, any stuff. And the theory behind that is, you want, as a commission, you want to look to one person, say, look, we adopted these policies, we gave you some goals and directives. If they aren't attained, we're looking to you, city manager, as to why not. And if the commission individually is giving direction to staff, it's really hard to go back and hold one person liable when they're being run by the elected body that's directing how things go on.
Different people, different
So,
directions.
That's a very common form of government. Another one that you hear is a strong mayor form of government. That is typically your larger cities. You see it in like Buddy Dyer in Orlando, strong mayor form of government. The same with there, the mayor serves in an administrative role and is also on the governing body. Sometimes they have different. Sometimes they don't have the right to vote. Sometimes they only vote to break a tie, those type of things. So that kind of changes. But I typically only see that with your larger communities, not smaller communities per se. Although that's really what the closest thing that Pierson is. You have kind of a strong mayor form of government. And then there's something that was really popular for a while. It came into existence after the hurricane wiped out the town of Galveston, Texas, and it's called the commission form of government. When Texas was hit, Galveston was hit that hurricane, the whole town was wiped completely out. So the governor appointed certain people in the community to be in charge of certain departments. Like, okay, I'm putting you in charge of public works, I'm putting you in charge of law enforcement, I'm putting you in charge of parks and recreation, I'm putting you in charge of administration, putting you in charge of public, whatever else. And in essence, each elected official is a department head. In that so you might have the mayor be the administrative head, then you would have one commissioner who's in charge of the liaison head of law enforcement. You'd have another commissioner in charge of public works. You might have another one in charge of parks and recreation.
Isn't that kind of what we do?
I think we met 2 and 3 together.
Yeah.
Do a little bit
Because we have someone over the
Public
water
works.
system, public works, public works, someone
Yeah.
over the water, someone over the,
Well, I think
whatever.
we
But
only
then
have one.
everybody
Yeah.
gets in there and
Well, you have the mayor who, I
individual
think it
direction.
basically says the mayor generally supervises. Let's see. So there's a provision somewhere that
Page
says the mayor.
4, I think. Supervision over all town affairs. It says-
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Or is that what section is that?
Section 2 at the top of page 4.
Okay. Yep, the mayor shall have general supervision over all town affairs, except the action of the town council, and shall report to the town council on all violations or neglected duty on the part of employees of the town that come to his or her knowledge. There's another one, I think it's pretty much in here that,
It also mentions the rule on,
is it a code section or is it the charter that talks about one of the commissioners will be the head of the water, will be an employee and head of the water department or something like that? It's either an ordinance or a charter provision.
not in the charter. Not
Yeah,
in
I
here,
don't-
we read this and picked it apart.
That might be it, because that's one thing, you can't do you can't be an employee and an elected official, so it's not really something you can do. So, but you kind of have a strong mayor form of government here. Going through this,
I agree with Sue, I think it's more 2 and 3
yeah,
type.
Yeah,
And it can get confusing to me, because some commissioner can tell somebody to do this, another commissioner can tell them, well, how do y'all know who to listen to? Or who's
Who's
the
in
right
charge?
one, who's the one that you should be doing what they say when it's.
I don't, where do you see that, I mean, maybe the way they operate, but I don't see anything in the charter that says, you know, Commission Seat 2 shall be in charge of the department.
But we've
Not in
always,
here.
they've always elected,
Elected
you're in
someone.
charge of public works, I'll
Yeah.
take on this, I'll do, you know.
Yeah, we have one now who worked for Public Works forever,
Right.
so it just made, yeah, so it just made sense.
It was public.
Right.
So-
It must be the code section that says they'll be appointed, you know,
It's under our ordinances, section 2-82 authorities. Public Works Department shall have the authority to supervise, plan, and implement. Section 283 director. The Department of Public Works shall be under the authority and control of the Director of Public Works, who shall be appointed by the Town Council. A member of the Town Council may be the Director of Public Works, and as such becomes an employee of the town. But see,
Yeah.
that's not right either, because
yeah,
he's
that's
not.
what
an
the
employee.
Robert's law.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, just looking at some things, on page 3 at the bottom, the authority of the mayor to, you know, basically the mayor is the judge. The, you know, municipal courts were abolished a long time ago. So that kind of looks like what we have here is a municipal court. That's probably section 1 there of the mayor's authority in terms of having the authority to serve as a judge in the community. Probably is not lawful.
we crossed that out last night thinking, well, you know, that sort of crosses over the line to what is being done elsewhere.
Yeah, well, if you're getting into true municipal court, yeah, that was outlawed. We do have our own codes. We do need to do code enforcement. And so there's been some discussion about that. What's the best way to do code enforcement here? You know?
For years, it's been the dirtiest word in Pierson.
That's what I hear, yeah.
Yes, nobody wants that.
You know, it says, you know, there's references in here to a treasurer. I don't think we don't really have a treasurer.
No. A lot of that's old, outdated language,
Yeah,
I think.
language that just doesn't currently exist.
Town marshal, town treasurer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and town council may select a bank or bank for depository. That doesn't need to be in charter. They have the authority to do that. It's just one of those things that doesn't need to be there. So, you know, one of the things you all need to decide is obviously the changes that you want to propose. And, you know, what ends up happening is we have to submit questions to the public. And each question contains kind of a single subject addressing an amendment. And so if there's a lot of changes, there may be a thought process that maybe what we just need to do is submit a new charter, as opposed to 10 questions, each one of these changes go through. Now, the problem with that all or nothing approach is you may lose some people who I support 7 of these, but I don't support all these changes, so I'm going to vote no. Whereas if you put 10 together, you might get 7 amendments, and then that would pass, and 3 that wouldn't pass. So, but just sometimes, and it can get, you know, if the referendum is done not by mail, which is the last time y'all did it, but all in an election, it can get costly if you go into another page of a ballot when you have a lot of questions. So I think
you can just submit a whole new charter.
you can. Mm-hmm.
Just-
I've done that.
We're simplifying, we're getting rid of old language,
We're just in that.
have a clean new
We've
charter.
done that numerous times in Lake County, it's failed every time. We did it in Oak Hill in the past.
I think out here people would welcome things that are clear and not confused with a lot of legalese that runs them around. They want to know, is this or is this?
And I don't know how many people are gonna seriously
Look at it,
look
yeah.
at it, you know.
If you
right?
see how many we get at our council
Question
meetings,
on the
you can't get them all.
charter changes or
You know,
whatever. Oh, we're
just-
gonna have-
Out of curiosity, are y'all salaries set by ordinance?
Ours, no.
Yeah. See, like here it says, section 5 on page 4, salaries of all officers of the town shall be fixed by ordinance. Doesn't need to be, but the problem is once you put it in there.
So we're
okay,
basically right now then not in compliance with the charter.
I don't like to use these terms. So, you know, it's just, when you look at this,
That's basically it.
yeah. when you look at it,
But we won't say it back there.
You know, just looking through this, so many of these things can come out, it's not necessary.
Yeah,
Because, you know, for instance, you know, go back to the, they select a bank or banks as a depository. If that's not there, does that mean you can't bank?
and we got it, when we were going through this, we got it down to, I think, about 3 pages. By the
you-
time we took out
So
the
maybe a
sections
new
that are,
charter, I mean, I'm just throwing, maybe that could be a thought everyone can think on, you know, maybe that would be a simpler approach, just a clean cut, simple.
What I can do is, you know, I can send you Holly Hills, but Holly Hills is a city manager form of government. And I'm certainly not lobbying that y'all change your form of government, that's not what I'm saying. But that's a simple charter, Holly Hills is a pretty simple charter. We're going through another charter review right now, like I said. I can see if I can find a simple, strong mayor form of charter, where the mayor has more administrative authority, if that's the direction you all want to go. Like I said, typically those are your bigger cities, and those might be kind of more voluminous than we want to get into. But
Are those mayors usually more of a paid position?
Yes, they are. Mhm.
Which we don't really, we get paid for
Yeah.
showing up at a meeting, so I don't know how many times people.
But it really wouldn't be changing, what we would really be, you know, doing is saying that the mayor shall have general supervision over all town affairs. What exactly does that mean? You know, that's,
pretty
Really?
open-ended.
it is pretty open-ended. So there's really only 2 authorities that I find in your charter. That one and the town clerk. The town council shall designate some person as town clerk, that's kind of funny, who shall keep a record of proceedings and do and perform such other and further duties as prescribed by the town council. So the mayor has supervisory authorities, town clerk does whatever the town council says. That's basically
Well, me too.
the authority that's given in there. So
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry,
Which
my
one?
mind wandered. What you just said.
the 2 authorities that you see is the mayor has general supervisory authority, and then the town clerk shall do those things that the town council delegates. Basically what it says.
So you touched on Lake Helen a minute ago, because that's a town kind of comparative in size of what we got here. What type of government do they have for theirs?
You know, that is, in my opinion, it is very debatable sometimes. They actually say that they're a commission form of government, except as provided herein. That's what it says. Commission form of government, except as otherwise provided herein. When you go through and you read the rest of the charter, it completely gets the whole concept of commission form of government. I try to explain that to them, but there's some old timers there that say, well, we don't have a manager, we have an administrator. I keep telling them, there's not a difference.
It's the same thing,
It's
yeah.
the same thing, guys, and the only difference is in Lake Helen is the commission does the hiring and firing, which, and any type of discipline that deals with demotions or anything like that, or financial impact. But absent that, honestly, the administrator in Pierson and Lake Helen has, per the charter, more authority than most city managers in a city manager form of government. Because in Lake Helen, the administrator also is the city planner, is also the city clerk, you know, per the charter. So there's a heck of a lot of authority given to the administrator over there. And then that's,
I think city managers administrating all my years of being are a good move in that.
here's
The structure, because somebody's held accountable, has authority, you don't have 5 different people
Right.
authorizing 5 different things, and then you can have those in here who are, that go and tell this commissioner something or that commission, but don't share that information with the
Right,
whole county. I mean, it just gets to that kind of like, so you have somebody in charge, they take care of the thing. I don't
And
know
it
that
wouldn't
Pierson can
be-
do that, but
You could, but you don't,
Say that.
and you don't even have to call a city manager. You don't have to go away from a town clerk. You just say the town, this is the authority of the town clerk. And the authority of the town clerk pretty much mirrors the city manager form of government. You know, they prepare, and it's honestly a lot of what we probably do right now. I mean, I haven't sat down here and watched them work, but I would happily guess that what they do, what y'all think what y'all do is pretty much what a city manager does.
Pretty much
I mean, in terms of running the day-to-day stuff,
Correct.
that's what the town clerk is.
paying the bills, ordering supplies, or, you know,
Yeah,
putting out fires. What,
And then
you
the-
name it, we do it.
and so the question comes down, really, is the employment, who has the authority to hire? That may be something we leave with the commission, the council, that's a, you know, recommendation from y'all, which way to go. And then purchasing, there's going to be a point, and that's really set by ordinance, but there's going to be, not by the charter, but the city needs a purchasing ordinance. And so there'd be guidelines on what can staff spend. Now, this money's already been budgeted. It's not like they're spending money that's not budgeted. It's already been set aside. Now that we're going to set up procedures on how we spend the money that the council's budgeted. And, you know, the higher the cost, it goes usually 1 verbal, 3 verbal, 3 written, and then a bid. And usually smaller cities have lower numbers than bigger cities. You know, I think Holly Hill, they don't go out for bid till it's $50,000. City manager has that kind of spending authority. I wouldn't suggest that here. It's $50,000 in your budget, $50,000 in Holly Hill budget, 2 different amounts. But that doesn't have to be in the charter.
some
So,
process, don't we, where it has to go out to bid for certain things and amount? I mean, we always did anyway.
Or they're supposed to get multiple quotes for everything, and then the council is supposed to decide. Now, if it's a contract like the garbage or the water operator, yes, that gets put out for RFP, and we accept proposals, and then they score them and rate them, and then pick one. But day-to-day stuff, when you talk about like repair and maintenance and things like that, we just get at this point we get multiple quotes, and then they decide.
and there's something to consider, and it's not, it would be more of a manager form of government, is there may be some decisions that really staff can make that don't have to go back to the council for, you know, are we gonna spend $500 to replace a mower? It's in the budget, is it really gonna go back to council? That's a policy decision, but, I would say in most cities, the answer is no. As long as that would be a decision that staff administratively usually makes, because you've gone through you haven't varied from our purchasing guidelines, and you haven't exceeded the amount of money we set aside for this purchase, so we're good. So,
Before Ryan came, the clerk had to do everything. Now we have a water clerk, a deputy clerk. And it looks like you've taken over more of the financial, and she does more of the procedural. And I mean, we never really designated, you just decided it.
It just
And
worked.
works, but
and that may be fine in that has been delegated by the town council to her, to the clerk, you know. And if we leave it the way it is, the town council just can decide. Okay, we're going to delegate this much. We're not going to delegate so much, and it just depends, which is also fine. But it's sort of like a strong mayor form of government is what we have here. I'll try to find you a strong mayor form of charter. It's simple. That is a mod that y'all can kind of use. Maybe get some ideas from.
Well, it just went back to, prior to the discussion of city manager type government. And you touched on it earlier, it said the mayor shall have general supervision over all town affairs. That in effect, to me, would make him sort of an administrator. In other words, everything goes through him. Yeah. So if they want to go dig a hole in Second Avenue or fill a hole in Second Avenue.
Right.
He could instruct them to do that rather than them finding out from 3 different or 4 different council members that
Right.
we need to fill a hole and put on Second Avenue.
The only kind of sort of variation is we have the ordinances that somebody being in charge of public works in your particular example, and that probably, the streets and roads typically falls under public works, so you might have a separation there. But other than that, you're right.
So if there was an issue where the mayor didn't agree with the public works, does his decision supersede public works?
Well, I think that has to go back to that would go back to the council.
To council, yeah.
But here's the issue you really have with that. For the mayor and the other commissioner of public works, who oversees public works, to disagree, they gotta violate the sunshine law. They're not allowed to talk, outside their meeting on an issue. And so that's just a bad arrangement right there.
Well, I'll tell you how that normally plays out. How that normally plays out is Public Works gets instructed to do something by one, and then the other calls and complains about it, and Yvonne and I say, let's put it on the agenda. Let's hash this out at a
That's
meeting.
how we resolve it, put it on
Which
the
is
agenda.
not the most efficient or effective way to do that, but everything we do here, we try to steer them from making unilateral decisions on their own. We try to, even if it's the mayor, we say, really would probably be better to take this to council, because that traditionally is how things have always been done here. Everyone needs to be aware, not on little things, but I'm talking, if we're going to rip up roads or replace culverts or.
The thing is, I see a lot of little things coming before council, which it eats up time.
Correct.
Well, it's because we have the unilateral issue where 2 people aren't agreeing on what they should do.
Well, and
This is where strengthening the mayor's position
Could be.
would be the direction I would go in. More like the city manager, but not exactly that. Just a stronger mayor.
The big issue I always see every decision you gotta take back to the town council, you only get 2 decisions a month. Unless you got a special meeting. And
Slows things down
it does.
for a long time.
Now, you may avoid a lot of disagreements or something like that because they all make a decision, but, unless it's true
But
emergency.
meanwhile, the issue is hanging out there to be decided, and people are going after the clerk saying, why hasn't this happened? We need this done.
And, it could be addressed in the charter. It could also be addressed in the delegation of authority by the council to the clerk. Clearly delineate what her authority is. Outline it very well, which is not really a charter question, but I think that it's always good to have a clear delineation of chain of command. When you, in any of these organizations, it's just, what can I do? What do I not have the authority to do, and I have to go to someone above me to do? When it's not clear, it does create sometimes some questions within the organization. And usually, staff will be cautious and say, let's bump it up to the commission to decide.
I don't think it's been real clear.
So,
I just don't think it's that clear.
In other
Because there
words-
seems to be a lot of what we're just discussing. One commissioner wants this, one wants that, gotta bring it all in. Gotta, or one tells one thing, one tells another, so they're getting.
And then we have sunshine law that gets involved in all of it, so we can't say anything to one council member that another council member has sent to us, so our answer is throw it on the agenda because we have no other way of resolving the issue.
And that's my thing, it's like, Director of Public Works, should they be on the council? Because of that.
I would say no.
I agree.
But that's not a
I'd say
charter
yeah.
issue. That's an ordinance issue.
That's an ordinance issue there.
Because we got a lot of, there are a lot of things.
It violates the law because state law says you cannot be an employee in a commission of the same city. Okay? So you got that violation right there. And then you have the clear potential sunshine violation that occurs. It's just a bad arrangement altogether.
Well, I have a question on that arrangement, that if Jimmy is not getting paid as a public work director, Does that make him by definition an employee still?
I would just take the word out an employee, but it doesn't, I would just say altogether, one of the commissioners could serve in that capacity as a supervisor, but that make it more or less the duty of a commissioner as opposed to an employee, but it doesn't resolve the sunshine problem. You still have the sunshine problem.
Another issue that we've had for years, and it's you've been doing better lately, was they make a budget, and that's the last we hear about it for months. I've served on a lot of different committees for the county and the area, and they have an accounting. Every meeting, there's a treasurer's report or an updated accounting. They need to be commended. At least quarterly, we've been hearing more about where the money is, because we'll come to a meeting, somebody say, well, they need $250 for this. Well, is it in the budget? Does it fit? They'll approve it, even not knowing whether it's gonna fit the budget, but.
Well, the problem was that Pierson used to set a budget because they were required to set a budget, and then they just never followed it. And so when the CPA audited us at the end of the year, it was all out of whack, because then they just spent money and never thought to look and say, well, did we even have money allocated for this? So for 3 years in a row, they got a deficient report from the CPA, which we had to submit to the state. But for the past 2 years, we have had a clean budget report. And I try to, it'd be nice to do it monthly, but the way things move around here lately with all the stuff that's going on with FEMA and everything, quarterly is about as good as we've got it. But I don't think that Pierson is really big enough that we're not purchasing enough that I need to update every month on, I mean, it's
keeping them more in line.
Oh yeah, they come in and come in and ask now, which is a blessing. Because
which is a blessing. Before they didn't ask. We're spending $10,000. Where are you getting it from?
There's a couple that if they didn't come and ask, we'd be in trouble, because some, like one of them came in earlier and wanted to know, well, can we increase the budget for repairs and maintenance here, because we're going to need this and that? And I was like, I don't think so. We're going to stick where we're at. But yeah, we're trying to get them trained to, this is how this is supposed to function, right? For a long time, the council just kind of did whatever they did. So, and to be honest with you, Scott, I don't really think they followed the charter a whole lot either. So that's the other thing, is you've got to kind of rein them in and say, okay, here's your powers, here's what you're allowed to do or not allowed to do.
Well, obviously not, because as we read through this, a
lot of it is old.
Not even
it's outdated.
pertaining to what happens or.
And a lot of what we're talking about is what is their powers. I mean, it typically, like when you do a city manager form of government, no individual commissioner has any authority. Mayor doesn't have any authority. It's a figurehead. But do they actually have the authority? They think they do, but they don't.
Well, they have the authority to hire a fire.
Not individually. I don't say
No,
individually.
as a council.
As a council. Their authority is when that gavel starts the meeting, while they're in a meeting, they sit together as a commission. That's their authority. They're 1/5 or 1/7 or whatever the board size is. But that's the authority. And 3 of them control what happens. But once the meeting's over and they walk away, they don't have any authority. They can't spend a penny of the city's money. They really can't. So it's just, and unfortunately, you run into that a lot. A lot of people go, I'm an elected official. Don't let it go to your head. You get in trouble. So, it's, and unfortunately, some people don't understand. I've run into a lot of elected officials who think they've been elected to go in and audit the whole city. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to right this ship. You can't do anything. You're one of 5. You better get 2 of the people to agree with you on something. You can only talk to them in a meeting. Right.
It would be nice to take our council and let them go sit and watch Volusia County fight it out. Their council members fight it out for a day and see how because it's a big dip. When I worked for Volusia County prior to this, and that's how it was. That county council, they argued all day and all night, and when it was done, they had no say in anything. They just went to their offices and did what they're gonna do, but they didn't handle anything.
And their meetings go to 2 in the morning.
Oh, yeah,
We started like
They start at
10.
10 in the morning and go to 2 the next day.
I've sat through some of them.
Shorter, limited 30 minutes.
I mean,
Thank you, that'd be great.
You know,
Well, we have even less decision,
Yeah.
but we have to give that authority somehow.
I will say it's been ruled that it's not a sunshine violation, but part of the sunshine law is open meetings. You gotta have meetings open to the public. And at some point, in my personal opinion, it gets to the point where the meeting really isn't reasonably open to the public. When you start getting 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, that's not open to the public reasonably. And so in Lake Helen, we adopted a policy, 11:30, we end. And you would say, oh, that's a long time. Yeah, it is a long time, but they need it. And they by unanimous consent, they can go 30 more minutes. But they have to be done by midnight. Now, I would fully support that in charter. To say all meetings must end. They start at what, 6:30?
6:30.
Do the charters address how long someone can speak
Yeah.
at the
Most
meeting,
people
or is
are
that just the
That's-
council?
the council does
Get
that.
up.
Because some people can get up and just drone on and on about superfluous things that have nothing to do with what even going on,
Does that
15 minutes
happen?
later. I have seen that once or
You've seen me
twice.
leave on occasion.
That have nothing and just go on and on, but I know some places you get a certain amount of time to get up, so you better be organized. They would-
Most
We have
jurisdictions
3 minute
do it, 3 to
limits, I
5
think,
minutes.
on,
And now, is that ever in a charter, or is that just something that it's agreed
It's
upon
agreed
by
upon
council
the council.
or?
in
Or the
growth
mayor.
management, you had to sign up if you wanted to speak ahead of time. So I quit. I only went to one meeting, came out and I said, I'm going back. I am not, your husband appointed me to go. That was the most hair-raising experience of my lifetime. When the girl next to me told me, well, when things get rough, you climb out that window. And I think,
She was serious.
she was serious.
She was deadly
They
serious.
had,
They
police.
fist fights here.
it was
You talking
terrible.
about the VGMC? Volusia Growth Management Committee?
Yeah, uh-huh.
It was terrible.
Yeah, I have.
I
We
kinda
could talk a
like
long
He
time.
was enjoying, I'm sitting up thinking, how do I get out of this thing?
Well, it was, the Growth Management Commission started to be used by anti-growth people to prevent
It was
development.
during the Farmington and all that,
Mhm.
that's when it got really
Yeah,
nasty.
I was involved in the charter review, and we were going to repeal the VGMC. We don't have to have it. We're only jurisdiction, it's only jurisdiction county that has that in the state. And we were able to get them to negotiate new rules about, the whole purpose of the VGMC is to provide a forum that disputing local governments, if one's proposing an amendment to their comp plan, and some adjoining jurisdiction has concerns, they can work it out. That's the only purpose for it. The VGMC got to the point where no jurisdiction had a problem, no disputes between jurisdictions. Staff would raise issues. VGMC staff would raise issues. And I was like, how can you raise an issue when the local governments don't have an issue? How is that possible? Well, never mind.
Got to be a free-for-all.
But fortunately, we got some new rules adopted by the VGMC that limited their authority.
That's good.
So that was very proud. And they don't meet. They were costing the county a lot of money for a while, $200,000 a year for their meetings, and that got cut way down after we changed the rules.
So Scott, I noticed, I was looking at some other town charters just out of curiosity.
Uh-huh.
A lot of them, at the beginning of their charter, when they talk about how the town was established, they also have like their boundaries in there with the legal descriptions. Is that a pretty standard thing? So here's a scary question for you. How do we determine Piersons? Because that has not been maintained properly over the years. How do you
We
find
had the
that?
same issue in Oak Hill.
Because I mean, if that's something I can start tracking down, we really need to track that down. But is that something that should be in there, do you think?
Well, every
Or
time you do an annexation,
you're supposed to
submit it
add?
to the state
Correct.
and update it. And so you're saying that's never been done?
No, that has been done.
Sometimes. We don't know.
When we were in office, it's been done.
But I don't know how
Prior
it's been
to
done
us,
historically
We don't
to us.
think it was historically.
Mark
done.
said most towns just keep an internal file, so they submit it to the state, but they also just keep adding to it, you know, and. But I can't find where previous
Any of
clerks
that
have
was
ever
done.
done that. So now I don't know how to go about, because I feel like we should do that.
You should, I mean, what,
Yeah.
I mean, it has nothing to do with y'all on the charter review committee.
Right.
But what I would say, but it is in the charter, but you're not gonna change that by vote, because if we've annexed property in, then
Mhm.
it's in. And
Mhm.
it doesn't matter that even if the voter said, no, we don't want it, you know, if they,
Right.
we're not gonna amend the boundary, you have to. So we're not gonna submit that to a charter change.
Okay.
But what I would do is just go back and pull every annexation ordinance
Mm-hmm.
and contact the state, Department of State, see if they have, this has been filed. And you're probably gonna have to get a surveyor that's going to redraw the city boundaries based on the, and I don't know how far back you go.
Well, I mean, Zevco and they do that. They provide maps to us, like the one there on the table, and they update it every year. So I mean,
With everybody
they
that's
have the
annexed
boundaries,
in.
so maybe they can.
If they have the boundary, then it's probably pretty simple. If they
Okay.
think they have every annexation incorporated into that, maybe they have a legal.
But you don't think that's something that needs to be in the charter because like other towns have it,
We could put it in there, but it changes all the time.
right?
Yeah,
Correct.
Yeah, that's the
not
problem.
saying
Okay, well, I
that
just-
The charter,
Right.
10-year.
I just didn't. I saw it in a lot of them, and I just didn't know if that was something that was pretty standard for towns to do, or
Yeah, I think that was the legal description at the time of that amendment.
Mhm.
You know, over the years, annexations occur all the time.
Right.
And whether or not, and maybe we just take it out, just say city boundary limits.
Well, I don't think it's that's what I'm saying. It's not in ours, but I've seen it in other people's, and so I didn't know if that was something we needed to add, if that was pretty standard stuff, or
I would probably say, yeah, a lot of times I do see it in there, but it's also something that's probably unnecessary.
Okay.
Because the city limit boundaries are going to be based on the map maintained by the city.
Right.
And amended every time we do a annexation.
Okay.
Any other questions, or I'll turn this over to you. Actually, you're chairman. I don't know.
Paul's just like, what are you talking about? You, me?
I'm just listening.
So Scott, what's the best way forward with this? Do we just set meetings and then everybody highlight what they think needs to be changed, added?
Mhm.
Okay.
And then we'll try to get you some other charters that may help give you some guidance and thoughts. I do not need to be at your meetings. You know, I came to this one just to give you kind of a history background on charters, so and some general direction. But really, I can show up if you have questions. You know, if you get a bunch of questions, I can come here and do it. The process will be y'all need to decide what you want to change. You know, what a majority of you want to change. Then you're going to have to come up with the language.
You said you were gonna shoot us some examples.
I'll try to get you some strong mayor form of government charters that might be of assistance for a small city. Can't promise I'll find that. That's kind of a unique request, but I'll see what I can find. But I'll also get you a form, because you may want to incorporate some of the manager form of government into the authority of the town clerk, and then have still a certain authority laying with the mayor.
Sort of bring
Both.
a little bit of everything
yeah.
under one and make our own dog.
Yeah.
You mentioned that they're gonna get the same pay that we do. I'm not used to getting paid for volunteer work.
That was a joke.
Oh, thank you.
They get 2 times 0.
Well,
You
they
get
get 2 times 0,
You get
That I get, all right.
But any change we would make, if we, just clarifying, we want to change this 2 years to some, that's all going to have to be, they could either be everything individual separate things that would be voted on, or
Generally, yes.
generally, what's the feeling of it? I mean, is that, do we want to have 20, because looking at this, we could have, how many changes? A lot of changes,
We might be
right?
able to lump some together that are things that are generally under the heading of outdated, inconsistent with state law, and then we, like strike the part about things and things like that.
So some could be.
Maybe lumped together.
Can we consolidate, like there's a little bit here about one thing for the mayor, a little bit here for the mayor, and is there ways to,
Yeah, you can do all those things.
so, like we were searching for something in here just a little while ago, and there's part of it here, there's
Right.
part of it over here, well, it has to be confusing to anybody that way. We need
There is also weird stuff in there,
Simplify.
like in 2020 when they combined the mayor with
Yeah.
the chairman seat. There's a thing that says in there that like that person will get elected at the next general election or whatever, but then the paragraph before it says they take their seat in October,
Which is another.
the first day, and I'm like, well, that's not.
No.
We don't do it in October. So in other words, that is completely redundant now. It needs to come out.
And use of places where it says, using the negative rather than put the negatives in, put it in the positive. Shall be a member of or a resident of, instead of shall not be, because that's confusing to people.
What
Plain
is
English.
everybody's feeling about making tons of change, going through and this, we're gonna cross it, we're gonna do this, or trying to just come up with a clean, what do you all think the people of Pierson would be more open to, or do you feel one way or another about it? Like they're gonna go through each item and go yes, no, or whatever? Or would they go, here, we've cleaned it up, we've got a new charter that goes by the new what the authorities that are already vested or whatever, what is everybody else's feeling about that?
Well, I think looking at some of these other charters will help us on that decision.
That's what I was gonna say.
I'm hesitant to throw one out and introduce a new one, but there's a lot of stuff in here I know that if it's all gotta be voted on by the voters, we're gonna have issues. And you even mentioned the expense of having a longer ballot, which I had not even considered. Because this town can't afford a whole lot.
And what you gotta do, so what the city has to do is they have to adopt an ordinance to present a ballot question to prepare the ballot question. You have a ballot title, you have a ballot question, with a ballot summary. And you submit that to the supervisor and put it on the ballot. Well, state law says the ballot title, it'll be 15 words, which is usually easily accomplished. The ballot summary has to exceed 75 words. That's not as easy to accomplish as you think, especially if you have a lot of changes.
Right. That's what I'm thinking with all this.
You start typing up a bunch of changes, trying to incorporate these changes because it's a summary of what this change is going to do, and you can use up 75 words pretty quick.
A lot of times I don't think the summary really summarizes.
How do you present a full new charter to someone before it goes on the ballot? Because obviously they're not going to print the entire charter on a ballot. Correct?
No, the question is, do you approve the new city charter? The new city charter.
So that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
How do you provide it to the citizens to see the new
put a
charter?
Copy, the ballot question, it's not going to be there anyway. They're not going to see the change. So at the polling place, you'll have a copy of this is what the charter will look like if it gets approved. Or if you do questions, you say, all right, this is what the change will look like with question 1. This is what the change looks like with question 2. And you have that at the polling place so that people can look at it. That will not be on the ballot.
But they can have it, obviously.
Yes.
So we can we can post it for people to read and things like that. Okay.
For public, for
Now,
review.
when we get into, especially if there's a whole new charter, the city is allowed to educate. When you start doing referendums, we can educate. We cannot advocate.
Right.
So there's a distinction. So we can tell you the positives and negatives, but we can't tell you how to vote. We can't say vote yes or vote no.
We could have an open forum, or you could come in, or a chairman, and explain, this is why we're proposing this, or
You can
this
do
is
that,
why this is
or-
no longer needed, or this was our thought process, and then they can go from
And
there.
also once the commission accepts the recommendation, or they take action on your recommendation, this body's disbanded. Well, there could be several months between you being disbanded and the election. At that point, you can do whatever you want. You can go out there and advocate all you want for the charter if you really strongly believe it, because you are no longer a city representative. You can't do it while you're on the charter review committee, but once the committee is disbanded, you're free to go advocate.
Being an elderly person like we are, we have elderly neighbors.
Thank you.
You're more older than me.
She's just rough. Jeez.
Well, I have noticed that our elderly population, we have a large elderly population, don't want to be bothered with details. They don't have the patience to go through, so we're gonna have to do a lot of educating. Either way,
Well, we've got talked in Lake Helen, we've
do
done
that
that, we've
kind
done
of they don't want change, they don't want to think about it, a lot of beliefs, oh, don't bother me with that, I just, it's too much for me to think about. And I'm thinking, yeah, but it affects you.
what we've done, talked about doing in Lake Helen, because they've tried two new charters, they've been shot down twice. And they said, maybe what we just need to do is each election, take a bite of the apple. A certain change in one election, next election do another change, instead of trying to do all the changes at one time. It was overwhelming. People don't support a whole new charter, so if we submit to them 10 questions, they're going to be overwhelmed and just say no. So let's just say, all right, we're going to deal with employment. Submit the question: should the city administrator have hiring and firing authority? Yes or no? And that's the only question. And in the next election, we will look at maybe going from a 2-year term of office to a 4-year term of office. But don't combine those things all together.
So how many decades would it take? How many commissions are gonna have to?
Not in our lifetime.
It doesn't take long, but we kind of said we group up into 3 groups. Not each question, but you'd have election changes, the terms of office, and then general things that need to just come out because it needs to be complied with. You're just not breaking up that.
And what are the ramifications if our charter isn't really the way we're functioning, or it has all these things that aren't really pertinent? Does it really matter then?
Well, technically it does, yes. I mean,
Okay.
the
But we
charter
could still
is
go
our
on for
constitution.
years and years, we're not having it really a reflection of what we're doing. If we took it little
Unless it-
bite by little bite.
It could
Right.
be, yes. But it takes somebody having the initiative to go to court to invalidate something we did as inconsistent with the charter for not compliance with the charter to actually matter. So if somebody wants to say their compensation is not valid because it was not adopted by ordinance, is anybody going to do that? Because the first thing we'll do is we'll adopt an ordinance and make it retroactive back. So no one's really going to push that issue.
So our charter says that we review it every 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But in the event, say you do write a new simplified charter that's 3 pages long,
Mm-hmm.
and the voters are like, I don't know, I don't feel good about this, and they say no. Can you address the charter again 2 years later at the next election? So it doesn't just have to be every 10 years. It could really be every election
It can be
cycle.
every election. Yeah.
But you're
Okay.
saying, address a little piece there in 2 years then.
And one option we haven't discussed, which probably isn't a good option, is make no changes at all.
That's true. Yeah, you don't have to recommend any changes. And honestly, when Oak Hill just went through their charter change, they had a bunch of very minor things. I was like, really? Do you really want to ask some of these questions just to reword something? Is that, why are you spending the money just to reword something? There's nothing substantive about this.
But there are some things. that
Okay,
do
so
need to
we're
be-
done then.
There are
Let's
some
go.
things that
We
do-
don't need,
Believe me, I would love to sign off on that right.
let's go.
But there are some things that do need to be changed.
Well, the mayor still can change. And what is it? It's been on there. The mayor shall chain the council. It's been there for, we tried to get it, it's a typographical.
Yeah. There's a few of
I would
those.
like to
Man,
see
wish
that.
I'd read that a long time ago.
Yeah.
Pass that on. I said, didn't you probably just change them
Caught
up?
that one. Mr. Proofreader here.
So probably how this will, work is y'all sit and deliberate and try to come up with consensus on, for a majority of you, on proposed changes. And then you'll let staff know, and then staff will get with me and we'll come up with rewriting some language to come back to you for see if that's the type of language you want. And once you go through everything you want to change, then it'll be voted on by you. And whether or not you want to put together the ballot title and ballot summary as a proposal, we can do that too, or you can just let the commission or council do that. That's okay. But
The council
That's
would say,
later.
well, thank you, but no thank you to any.
Exactly what I
You'd be doing it.
all right. Any questions?
Yeah, if you just take a hunk out, you have to put that in as a question.
Most likely. Like, the one about the mayor being the judge.
You have to move that whole section out.
You gotta take the whole thing out. But that's, it's kind of, I gotta think about that one just because if it's not legal, I'm not sure we wanna give the public the choice.
Right.
And I'm not sure why it wasn't taken out 10 years ago or back in 2016. If it's not legal, I don't know what the discussion was back then.
If it's not legal, do you need to take it to referendum, or can you just remove it because it's invalid now?
I would think we could remove it, but I don't know why it wasn't removed back then. I don't know if the idea was this whole thing about offenses was really code enforcement. Was the whole thing just a code enforcement? The mayor also served, we briefly discussed earlier, code enforcement. That's still a question. Not just who issues a citation, but who makes the determination? How are we going to do code enforcement? Where's it going to go?
On page 2, transition from merger of officers of mayor, council chairman. That's really just a statement of history. Does that need to be in there?
I think it was put in just so it was to be explained, so people understood what happens. It doesn't harm that being in there. It just explains what occurred historically to get to where we are today. Because I know there's some charters we amended when you go from a 2-year to a 4-year term, you have to have that kind of language.
Because as it's written, it says, the office of vice mayor shall become effective on November 2020. There shouldn't it be, will we have to change it to read it positively, like, creating the office of vice mayor became effective on November 2020 municipal election, at which time the office of mayor was shifted to a 4-year term. Make it positive rather than something that hadn't happened.
I don't know that I would make that change. That was how it was worded at the time. That was submitted to the people in the language. I would just.
If there's an obvious typo,
We probably don't need that.
I think chain can be changed.
I kind of like that.
But on the ballot, it shows, if I remember right, like, this is the way it was, or it's kind of struck through, isn't it, or something, here's what we're
It's
proposing.
not the
or-
ballot that
Not
way.
the ballot,
But
but on,
Then there
we
will
get
be
something.
there will be information of what's going to be on the
Okay.
voted on, but the ballot you're just going to have the ballot question.
The question. 'Cause
Summary.
I think we
I
saw
thought
that
there was something.
There was the actual ordinance was
Yeah.
provided somehow that had the
Yeah.
strike throughs
That
and the
had the strike
addition.
You'll have that
through, and this is the
available.
way it was,
Yeah.
and this
This
is
is
what
the way
we're
it's gonna
proposing.
be.
Didn't I see that?
It's a supplemental. I want to say they mailed that out with the ballots or something.
They may have.
that's what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, they do explain what it boils down to.
But I think that's how our original ordinance read. It said these changes are being, or these items are being eliminated because it's obsolete language, and then they just listed the section numbers all in a row struck through.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was one question, can we remove all these sections?
I think actually that was just removed. without a vote. I'm not sure they voted on that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I think they went back and said, per this charter,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the home rule part, that was a nullity.
Yeah.
And so that came out. I think that's how it was ordered. But then they had changed, because they had two ordinances.
Mm-hmm.
One, they just took things out. The other one is they submitted questions.
Right.
On mail out ballot.
So how often are we gonna meet? Chair and co-chair? Because we gotta turn it, have we met
How
long
often do you
enough for
want me?
today? Yeah.
Well, how often did y'all meet when Tony Few's election?
I think we had like a few weeks we did it intensely. Because we started out, it was this big when we started out. So we met intensely for a couple of weeks, like 2 weeks or something. And then we were done for a few months, weren't we?
We gotta have time to get.
There weren't very many sets of minutes that I could find. It wasn't a ton of
We would meet
meetings.
again to determine, do we wanna
There was
go
never
through piece by
anything
piece,
done.
or,
Mm.
so we need a little time period now, so we can look
Yeah,
at those
give-
before we come
maybe a
back
month
and
to
go,
look over
yeah, I would
everything.
say maybe that. And then we can decide, do we wanna pick this one piece, you know, apart, or are we gonna try to go with something
Well, we need to look
else?
at it depending on when we can get it, but, you know, the thing is, I mean, should we meet again in 2 weeks, and then, if we have those, you know, I don't know just how quickly it would take to get them.
What time frame do you think before, because you gotta find them first, right?
Some of them are very easy to find. It's just trying to find a strong mayor form of charter that would be something that would be suitable here. It might take a little longer. I mean, I can quickly send you some, you know, simple city manager form of government's one. Probably those are a good one. It's not very big. Doesn't address a lot of issues.
But, well, we don't need to be overwhelmed by it.
No, I'm just thinking 2, 3 charters at most.
And if we're not, but you're saying the clerk could actually be that city manager in that form. Did I not understand that?
Yeah,
So,
put in power.
so you still could have a charter, even though you wouldn't go out and hire a new, this is our new city manager, like
Right.
they have in South Daytona or whatever. Yeah, so,
Designate the job.
so that charter might still be helpful.
Mhm. And actually, they're all worded very similar. When you look at a city manager form of government, that part of the language is very, very similar from charter to charter. There's authority given to the manager, administrator, clerk, and then there's a prohibition from the commission giving direction to staff. That's consistently in everyone.
So I have a question. You said you thought this government was more like a strong mayor,
A little bit.
like in that type, does the mayor come in every day, like say Buddy Dyer? Is it like a job he's here every day, or does he need to be here every day?
I never worked for a strong mayor form of government. They're all typically really big cities.
So it would be a paid position.
Those are
Absolutely, they are, and, then,
Yeah.
and usually, I don't know if y'all remember, there was the city manager for Daytona for a long time. His name was Howard Tipton. When trying to think of who we had a long-term mayor in Daytona.
Not Richie.
Richie?
No, for him.
I can't
I can't think of his name
I
right.
forget.
I think the football field is named after him over there at, pretty sure, one off of LPGA,
Okay.
across from Lopez. I can't think of his name. I can picture him.
I can picture him, but I
Yeah.
can't tell you his name.
But there was a guy that ran against him all the time, Paul Carpenter.
Yes.
As a restaurant owner, ran against him, and everybody saw he was running against him. And all of a sudden, Paul Carpenter won in like the primary election or something like that. And it was nice. But anyway, Howard Tipton, who was a long-term city manager, left Daytona. He was hired by, I believe, when Glenda Hood was the mayor of Orlando. Now, she was a strong mayor form of government. This whole story I'm telling you is, whenever you see a strong mayor form of government, the elected administrative head will go and hire a city manager to be the assistant, who probably does all the work, the day-to-day stuff. That's what Howard took work for Orlando for a while.
You know,
I see what you're getting at.
Are you talking about Bud Asher?
Everybody's working.
Asher.
No, it was before
No.
Bud Asher.
They don't have. a
Before
full-time-
Bud Asher?
This is
Think
not
so.
their full-time
Yeah,
job.
but we're so small.
Yeah.
That we don't have the issues that Orlando would have or Chicago.
I think Asher probably covered.
Larry Kelly?
There you go.
Kelly.
Larry Kelly, there you go.
Yes.
Oh my
That was
gosh.
it. Thank you.
That was way back.
Way back.
I'm not old, thank you.
May I suggest then that once you are able to send us some, or send to the town, some charters that Yvonne get with you and you establish the date for next meeting.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah.
But I'll give that to you as soon as I can.
And we can, I mean, just for clarification, it doesn't have to be all one or all the other. You can kind of have a weird hybrid form where you
Absolutely.
take some
can do
stuff
whatever you
from.
want. You
Right.
you pick and choose what you like, and which I would probably recommend.
Because we are an unusual circumstance out there in a lot of different things.
I would say you're similar to other small cities, but I say small cities are unusually have unique circumstances compared to medium and large cities. And so, a small city is not going to. If you had a city manager form of government, you're going to get one of two types of managers: people who are starting their career and they're looking at this as a stepping stone, or somebody who's already gone through the whole process and they're looking at this to slow down.
Slow down.
And that doesn't work. I've seen it, and I can tell you that is the worst idea. Because in a small city, everybody thinks that, well, I'm going to come to a small city and it's just going to be slow. And all city managers do is delegate. Even in medium-sized cities like Hollywood, all they do is delegate. There's nobody to delegate here to. You have to do it. It's like same with Lake Helen. There is no delegation. And when they go out for a city administrator, because their charter is much closer to a manager form of government, I said, y'all need to tell them, the applicants, that this is really more of a hands-on type job. Like, if you tell a manager, you need to prepare an agenda, in their head, they're thinking, okay,
Secretary.
I'll refer to the secretary who will type up everything. I'll look at it, I'll prove it, and I prepare the agenda. In a small city, no. You got to type all those things up, and you got to put it together yourself.
So I'm gonna go to you.
Yeah, that's what. and you can't afford. A city like Pierson cannot afford to pay someone $150,000 to delegate to Ron and Ryan to do things. That's just financially not doable in a city like this. The bigger cities, yeah, they can kind of justify it, maybe. But I've worked with enough city managers. I can tell you they delegate. And in Lake Helen, I went down there one time and we had Lee Evatt working there. And he had been a county manager and he was probably in his late 70s. And I think he was kind of slowing down things and he didn't know, he was having to learn how to type and do all this stuff himself. And I went in the State Hall one time looking for him. He was at a table like this, stuffing envelopes with water notices. That when you have a small city, you got to do it all. You got to do it all.
Well, that's what we do.
That's what we do.
Yeah,
Everything.
and that's what it is. I mean, you're a jack of all trades. There is nobody to delegate to.
I suggest we adjourn. Anyone
I second it.
second that? Let Paul ask the question. Are we in favor? I am. I got company coming. I gotta get home.
The softball game started 28 minutes.